In the late hours of the night, a young man named Brandon experiences some car trouble. He called his family for help, only for when they arrive, he's nowhere to be found. A search ensues, and volunteers and search dogs get his scent, only to turn up nothing. And this sounds like a case that's all too familiar, one that I've already covered on this channel. But this isn't the case of what happened to Brandon Lawson from San Angelo, Texas. This is the case of what happened to Brandon Swanson from Marshall, Minnesota. And just like in the investigation with Brandon Lawson, I go to the exact location where his car was found, in hopes to find a better understanding of what could have gone wrong. But in all honesty, all I end up with is more questions than I have answers. And this is the case of what happened to Brandon Swanson. So sit back, relax, and maybe together we can get a better understanding of what happened. Brandon Victor Swanson was born January 30th, 1989. And by the age of 19, he was 5'6", and he was attending the Minnesota West Community Technical College out of Canby, Minnesota. On May 14th, 2008, he set out to Lynd, Minnesota to celebrate a going-away party for a fellow classmate. From there, he traveled to yet another party celebrating the end of the year in Canby, Minnesota. Now, Canby was roughly 35 miles from the town of Marshall, Minnesota, which he called home. And later in the night, Brandon's friends and family would both report that he did not seem intoxicated. Okay, so sometime after midnight, Brandon left the party in Canby, which he was going to head straight home, or so everybody thought, which was a route that he took almost every day to go to college. But instead of taking South Dakota Highway 68, which was the most direct route from Canby to Marshall, he decided to take some local farming back roads. And honestly, probably to avoid the police. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of people don't report on it, that a few years before, Brandon had actually received a minor DUI, and this could be a reason why he took the back roads in the first place. And I have read a lot of articles on how Brandon crashed his car into the ditch, but I've also kind of done a little bit further research onto it, and it was less of a crash and more he was on the back country roads and he turned down what would be considered a minimum maintenance road, and in an attempt to get off of that road, he ended up backing up into a ditch, getting high centered and getting stuck. So less of a crash and more of an accidental getting stuck in a bad situation. At around 1:54 in the morning, he called his parents to ask for a ride home. He told them that he had gotten his car stuck, and he made sure to let them know that, for the most part, he was not injured. He was okay. He just kind of ran into some bad luck. So, Brandon's parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, they head out to find Brandon, and they go to the area of which he describes as where he is, near Lynd, Minnesota. They find nothing but darkness. So, in their search, they're still on the phone with Brandon the entire time, and they decide, what we're going to do is we're going to flash our lights on and off in an attempt maybe you could see us. And at the same time, Brandon tells them, well, I'll turn my lights on and off. Same reason, maybe we'll be able to see each other a little bit easier, maybe. So, and it was even reported by the parents, Annette Swanson was on the phone with him, said that she could hear his lights clicking on and off during this time, but they couldn't see each other. And eventually, Brandon would get very frustrated with his parents because it's late at night, and he thinks he's directed them to exactly where he is. Now, obviously, we know now that that's not the case, so he tells his parents, well, don't you see me? Being very frustrated, and I'm sure he just kind of over the night. He hangs up the phone out of a little bit of anger. His mother eventually would call him back and apologize, and they would continue to stay on the phone. I believe this entire phone call situation, from when he first called his parents to the last time he spoke with his father was roughly 45 minutes. So, at this point, Brandon tells his parents that I see lights, I believe it's the town of Lynd, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start walking there, and we'll meet at the Lindwood Tavern, which was the pretty popular bar that was open late. So, and I'm not sure why it was never quite made apparent to why this next part happened, but Brandon Swanson took his wife Annette home in between this time, and I'm guessing it's probably due to the fact that it was late at night. So, the entire time, still on the phone with Brandon. And Lynd in Marshall, Minnesota, they are so close. I'd say 5 miles from each other, from the town of Lynd to the town of Marshall. I'm not sure, but I'll Google it and I'll put it right up here for the exact speed there, but it's not very far at all. So he takes her home, and he comes back to the Lindwood bar, staying on the phone with Brandon the entire time. This probably would have taken him roughly about 20 minutes. And during this time, he's speaking with his father, and Brandon and Brian are having this conversation. Brandon decides, I see the town, and it's a straight shot, but I had to cut through these fields. I'm going to get off the road. And this would ultimately lead to his disappearance / death. So, he's on the phone with his father, and he tells him, I come up to a fence I'll have to jump over, as you would to enter a field. And he goes a little farther through the field, and he tells his father, I've come to another fence, as you would when exiting the field. He jumps over the fence, and eventually he comes to an area, and he describes it to his father on the phone that I hear flowing water as like a river or a stream. And at this point, Brian hears Brandon exclaim, "Oh shit." And then the phone goes quiet. I'd like to point out that I've heard a lot of people talk about this part as the phone goes dead, as if the phone was to have call had ended. But the call itself actually did not end. Brandon's father, Brian, would say that he was still on the line with him, tried to get a hold of him, calling his name, what's going on, no response, and then after a few minutes, he would hang up the phone and then try and call Brandon back, hoping that the phone would light up and he'd be able to see it and pick it up. So, eventually, Brian would call Brandon's friends and let them know what's going on, and they kind of formed their own little search party at this point. And it went well all morning, all through the night, and okay, so the next morning, I believe it was, hold on a second. Okay, so at around 6:30 the next morning, Brandon's mother, Annette, would report him missing to the police. And at first, the police department didn't really seem too interested in helping, because the way they described it was he's a college kid, not returning home immediately after a party. Doesn't exactly seem like a reason for concern, as you would. But eventually, they would help out and start a search. But before that, one of the things that's very, people focus a lot on is the fact that one cop had told Brandon's parents that Brandon is a young man who has the right to go missing, as in he has the right to stay out late and that kind of thing. So eventually, they did help start a search. A county-wide search was requested, and since Brandon's phone was still on and active, they were able to triangulate the exact location of where Brandon made his last phone call using cell phone towers. They discovered Brandon's car stuck in a ditch off of Lincoln Road, which is actually between the town of Porter and Taunton, with actually quite closer to Taunton. Inside of Brandon's car, it was reported that they had found a pipe and Brandon's glasses, but there was no sign of a struggle or Brandon. At this time, an extensive search was underway, and they had search dogs, helicopters, people searching the ground, and eventually the dogs would pick up a scent which would lead them 3 miles away towards the town of Porter to the Yellow Medicine River. Now, the river that night, or that day, was flowing very fast, and eventually the dogs did lose this scent. And over the next 3 weeks, on this 6-mile stretch of river, nothing would ever recover. So, in late 2008, Emergency Support Services, organization based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, has kind of narrowed down the search to a 140-mile square area of farmland that they believe that they wanted to focus their search on. However, they did run into quite a few problems going on with the farmers in the area not wanting search dogs and other people, walking all over their crops, which is an understandable thing. But this is still kind of a problem for searching for Brandon to this day, is a lot of the farmers, understandably, do not want people on their land walking and destroying their crops. Okay, so this kind of leads me into the theories of what happened to Brandon. And one of the most popular theories is, and most believable, is that Brandon simply drowned. He fell into the river and was swiped away and, possibly got stuck under and drowned. Now, Brandon's family had a hard time believing this because he was a strong swimmer, and the deepest part of the river is about 15 feet deep. So there are other parts of the river where you can literally just stand up. And they don't believe that that's exactly what happened to him. Some people believe that, yes, he did fall into the river, and eventually he got out on the other side, but due to the cold temperatures of that night, he would eventually succumb to hypothermia and pass away. And I've actually heard some people take it even further, saying that they believe that he not only died of hypothermia, but he's laid out in a field and he was still alive. And I don't like this at all. People believe that he was chopped up into farm equipment and that he was alive during that point, which I think is honestly just rude to even suggest something like that. I feel bad even talking about that stupid theory that somebody had chopped him up. Anyways, moving on from that point, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's more for shock value than anything. So another theory is that Brandon Swanson faked his death. That honestly would be probably the best outcome that we could hope for, but ultimately makes no sense. Brandon Swanson was a very intelligent kid. He was studying to go into renewable energy, and in 2008 was a perfect time to start something like that. He wanted to basically look into renewable energy to help the planet. Brandon was a very smart kid, in my opinion. It doesn't make any sense for him to just run away from his life. But before I get into my own theories on what I believe happened to Brandon, I did travel to the area where his car was found. I filmed a couple areas around there. I even went to the area of where the Lyndwood Tavern is. So let's take a look at that, and whenever we get back, I will tell you what I personally think happened to Brandon Swanson. Okay, make sure I'm recording. I am on 160th Lincoln Lyon County Road in Minnesota. This should be almost approximately the exact same spot where Brandon Swanson crashed his car. Now, I know I made a video on, I'm sorry about the audio on this. I left my microphone at home, forgot all about it. But I made a video on Brandon Lawson in Texas, and a lot of you guys were saying, no, Brandon Swanson is who you're thinking of. Two cases very similar, but judging off the photos of where he crashed his car, I do believe that I am in the right area. If you can see, the road kind of humps up there on the ditch, and if I can zoom in, you can kind of see the exact same layout of hills and stuff, and I will have that well, there we go. So it should be in this area. He's on the left side of the road. Now he thinks he's near, what am I thinking? Lynd. He thinks he's near Lynd, Minnesota, or Lynd, Minnesota, but in reality he was not. He was here, and he started walking. I know he ended up walking through some fields. Now, if you look around here, there's not a lot of anything. We're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The idea that Brandon went missing out here is kind of insane to me. Now, as you know, he called his parents late at night. He tried to get them to find him. He thought he was near Lynd, which he is not. He's near Taunton, and he takes off walking. Tell him that he's going to meet him at a restaurant in Lynd, which I plan on visiting hopefully before I leave here, which was actually 20 miles from here. Nowhere near where he thought he was. Nowhere at all. Now, as many similarities as he had to Brandon Lawson's case, Brandon Swanson, this terrain out here so far is not terrible. I mean, if you remember Brandon's Lawson's in Texas, there was cactus and a lot of hills and stuff that was just terrible. Now, I'm not saying that this wouldn't be a heck of a trek, especially since you remember Brandon crashed his car in the vicinity of this area. He was blind in one eye. He left his glasses in the car, which I believe that he lost whenever he crashed. Not really crashed, he wasn't like hauling ass from my understanding, but he lost his glasses in the car. They said his glasses were found in the car. It doesn't mean that they put them on the dash or anything nice. And I'm guessing he took off that direction. I'm not 100% sure. This would be west, north, east, south. He had to jump a few fences. If I remember correctly, there's water out that way. I might be wrong. If you're from this area, don't call me out. I'm not exactly from here. But yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, not too bad. It's kind of insane to think that he's gone. Now, obviously, this was in 2008. Brandon would be my age. We were born on the exact same year, 89, so he would have been 34 this year. Around us with stuff. I mean, cornfields. Hopefully I'm giving you better information than what I can give you right now. I did want to come out here so that we could see what it looked like out here. See what Brandon was up against. I mean, in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., 4, something like that. I'll get the exact time put up here. And he's blind in one eye, has no glasses. Just what the hell happened? Doesn't make any sense. Whole lot of nothing out here. Probably some wind. But I believe he went that way. All right. This is right down the road from where Brandon went missing. River on both sides. I'm guessing it was higher then. literally right down there is where car was found. And honestly, Taunton is straight shot that way. I'm guessing if they're going to find him, it's going to be in this area. Okay, that right there, you can see the grain elevator there. That is Taunton. Where I was literally right back there, filming the river and stuff. And this is the road, maybe 3 miles altogether. Maybe 3 miles altogether from where Brandon wrecked his vehicle is the town of Taunton. So, if you ask me, he went and fell either in the water there. If they're going to find him, it's going to be in this area. Okay, so this is Lynd, Minnesota. This is where the Lyndwood Tavern would have been. Is one of these buildings here. It's been permanently closed now since then, but this is where Brandon Swanson, Brandon's father, would have been talking to his son on the phone whenever he heard him yell, "Oh shit," or say, "Oh shit," which means that I had to drive like 25 miles or 25 minutes to get here. Brandon Swanson was very clearly mistaken as to where he was that night, as we already know. But this, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a visual on what this town looks like, or what we got going on here. Now this is 2023. This is October, so it would have looked a little different. Obviously, the restaurant's been closed now for a while, but so this is where that was. Okay, my theory. I believe Brandon started to walk towards the town of Taunton and not Porter. It would have been the only one town that was visible from night, especially with no glasses in the middle of the night, and I believe that the dogs led searchers in the wrong direction, much like they did with the Brandon Lawson case out of San Angelo. Now, looking at a map of the area of Taunton, you can see if he was to walk towards Taunton, he would have to jump over a fence and eventually would come to the Yellow Medicine River, just in a different spot. I believe this is where he possibly fell in / accidentally lost his life. Going towards Porter, at least to me, it doesn't make any sense. Since he was blind in one eye, it would have been even harder, especially at night. And I know a lot of you are wondering, why did he remove his glasses? And I actually looked into that myself, on why somebody who is blind in one eye would eventually remove their glasses. And what I found is that sometimes people with blindness in one eye, especially at night or under intoxication while driving, can get double vision, and that removing the glasses actually makes it a little bit more bearable and not so terrible to be able to focus. I do believe he was under the influence a little bit more than his family and friends thought he was. You know, he went to 2 parties, and you know, he didn't drink here much here, but he did drink some there. You never really know with this kind of situation. I believe that's why he took the back roads in the first place, was to avoid the police. Since he did have that minor infraction when he was younger, avoiding the police again, you know, he doesn't want to get in any more trouble. He does have a bright future ahead of him, and he does not need to have a record. Instead of taking the straight shot from Canby to Marshall, that's why I think he got off on the dirt roads. And that also would explain why he thought he was so close to Lynd whenever he was 25 miles away next to Taunton. Me believing that he was under the influence, does that make me think he was a bad person? Absolutely not. Brandon was a smart person with a good heart, and from my research, he would go out of the way to help anybody who asked for his help. He was a smart man, smart young man, and going to a field that he believed would help the world. And honestly, the world would be a better place with Brandon Swanson in it. And if we had more people like Brandon, and someday I hope that we can give an honest answer to what happened to him, to his family. I wish we could return him to his family. Now, with that being said, my heart does go out to his family, who to this day still leaves their porch light on as a sign that hopefully he will come home, and kind of like a little symbol of hope. And his also his family fought to make Brandon's Law, which helps it possible to get the police to start looking for adults quicker in Minnesota, rather than having to wait a certain amount of time. With Brandon's Law, you can start looking for them a lot sooner. I want to know what you guys think. What makes the most sense to you? Let me know in the comments below, and believe it or not, I do respond to pretty much every comment. Share this video, and even if it's only to keep Brandon's case alive and to get more people aware. Now, with that being said, please stay safe, everyone. And I'll see you in the next one.